Okay guys, Springfield XD subcompact, full disassembly and reassembly. Alright guys, this is going to be an almost full disassembly. There's one part on here that I'm definitely not taking off, and that is the extractor, and I'll tell you why. On the extractor guys, if you have a full size XD or standard size XD, there's a little tool you can get. You can get one from pistolgear.com, and it's an extractor puller. Works pretty well. But now they state on it in the description of their tool, it may not work on subcompacts. So I talked to them about it, and they said the reason why is that there's just enough difference in slides, and the tolerances are just different enough to make the tool where it may not work. Said, so that's why they have to put it on there. I said, well, generally do they? And he goes, generally he has more trouble with them with a subcompact frame than he does not have. So there's more problems with doing it. He said most of them don't work correctly. So I talked to a friend of mine who was a couple hours away who is a certified gunsmith, and he said, because I talked to him about the extractor, and he said unless it's broken or not functioning correctly, he doesn't recommend taking the extractor off, at least especially the subcompact. So because you can break them. He said there are some tools you can use. He said but they may or may not work. He said have a spare ready if you're going to remove it. So I mentioned I saw that I've seen some videos where people were tapping on it from the top of the ejection port, and he said no. He said he does not recommend doing that. He said you may do that 15 times and never have trouble. He said, but you may do it once and it'll break it. So always have a spare. And he said he didn't see a purpose for removing it unless it was malfunctioning or it was broken. So we're not going to remove the extractor, but we'll take everything else out. And so first thing that we got to do to get started with that is clear the weapon, because we want to make sure it's cleared, which it is pretty much. Nothing chambered anyway. All right, lock the slide back, flip the takedown lever up, pull the trigger, pull the slide off, set the frame down, and we're going to start with the slide. Now let me zoom in here just a little bit, and I will try to keep my fat fingers out of the way, so I'll try to show you exactly what we're doing. Now the first thing that you want to take off is the back plate. Now this is where the striker indicator comes out of this small hole. Well, this larger hole here, you can see it's ringed. The whole thing goes in. Okay, so I use a plastic pin tip, push it in, and start the cover down. That's all you got to do. You can use a punch. I use a plastic pin because I don't want to mar the surface. Now, when you take this thing off of there, it will fly like crazy. So make sure you have your hands over it. Springs, guys, make sure you cover your springs because they'll go flying. Just put your thumb over it, pull the back plate down, and release tension on the spring. Set the back plate aside, and then the assembly will come out. Now, here's your striker indicator and your spring, and then the guide. And the spring is symmetrical, guys, so it doesn't matter which way it goes, but we'll just leave this little assembly together. All right. And then the striker will not come out any further because you have a retaining pin. So what you'll have to do is a 3/32 size punch, and you're going to want to tap it out from the underneath of the slide. Now you do not have to remove this pin all the way, okay? You remove it just far enough to get the striker out if you're wanting to do a thorough cleaning on it. So just tap it out, and I use a great tip that I learned from Pete years ago, and other people do it as well. Roll of tape, best roll pin aid remover you can have. That didn't sound right. Anyway, start tapping it out. And it did come all the way out. But then you can pull out the striker, and then there's a spring in there. Set it aside. The pin came all the way out, but that's all right. And then you can set your striker and your striker spring aside. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to remove is, well, probably should go ahead and take the barrel out. Should have done that earlier. Next thing that we're going to remove is there's a pin back here. Okay, and it is actually called the striker safety retaining pin. All right, and so in order to get that out, I use a pick and then the striker safety right here, it's under spring tension. You can push it down, and there's a little lip on this pin, and I use a pick and get on that lip and just kind of start to pry it out. Once it starts to come out, you can use your fingernail and just pull it on out. Okay, set it aside, and then your striker safety will come free of the frame as well. And there's a spring on it, and it fits in this little hole right here, and there's a matching hole down in the slide. Okay, you can set them aside. The only thing left to take off now is the chamber indicator. We go back to our little duct tape roll, take a punch, and it doesn't really matter which side you knock it out from. Punch it all the way through, comes out, and now this is under spring tension as well. So I put my thumb over it, remove the punch, and then slowly release it. Here's your chamber indicator, and here's your chamber indicator spring. And that's a little bitty motherfucker, and you can lose it in a heartbeat. But that's it, guys, with the exception of the extractor. Now, what I was talking about before, a lot of guys, well, they'll put like a punch. I've seen it on some of the YouTube videos. They'll put a punch right here on it, and they'll tap on it slightly, and until they work it loose. I'm not doing that, because you can break this. I don't have a replacement, and so I don't want to break it. But that's it, guys. That's basically your slide disassembly at that point. So next thing you got to do is put it back together, pretty much the reverse order. Now, what I have found, this little bitty spring, be very careful. Down in here, there's a hole that this spring will fit into, and it has a lip that it can set on back here, or it can rest on. And if I can get the damn thing down in there. There we go. And it just kind of rests in this corner, okay? Then you take the chamber indicator itself. I push it straight down and just hold it under pressure, okay? Spring will fit on this small little rise back here. Kind of work it and hold it down, and I hold it with my finger. Get the pin, start it through, and then once it gets to a certain point, you can release it. And then just take your mallet, hammer it home, and then go ahead and recess the pin slightly. If you go too far, knock it back through from the other side. Recess it slightly, not all the way out the other side. And then that's it. You can test it, see if it works, and there she goes. All right, so the next thing that we're going to want to put in is our, so we're going to put in our striker safety pin and our striker safety. First things first, again, this little spring, there's a small hole in here. Drop it down into the frame so it fits in that hole. Then line up the hole that's on the bottom of the striker safety. Put it on there and make sure that it will go ahead and push all the way down into the slide itself. Okay, take the pin itself, the striker retaining pin. This little lip is the one that we're talking about before. It's got to be toward the back, smooth in toward the front. Go ahead and put it in the hole, holding the safety down, and then I use a screwdriver and I just recess it. Or seat it home, and then you can release it and it'll stay. Next thing that we're going to put in is going to go ahead and start our pin back into our striker assembly. Now this right here is what I mean. It's going to be hard to see on camera, guys, but this pin more or less comes like this, okay? It's got an angle to it. So that's what I meant by saying close in. It's got to go in first, okay? Because it goes into a channel that kind of cones, all right, and that's what holds it in. So once you get this started, you turn around, and I just go ahead and put the striker back pressure spring on, because that's actually, I don't think it's actually called that. I think it's called a dampening spring. So I put it in, and then go ahead and drop the striker assembly down, and then you can turn it over. I go ahead and put it back on the tape, and knock the retaining pin home, and then take the 3/32 inch punch, recess it ever so slightly, and then your striker assembly will not come out. All right. The last thing to do is to put our striker indicator spring in, and here's where it can be kind of tricky. Now, the retaining plate has a flat side to it. Okay, the flat side goes toward the inside of the frame. This spring is pretty stout, so when you start to push it in, it's going to be very, very hard to hold it. So you have a lip right here. This is where a flathead screwdriver comes in perfect. Start it in, get it under pressure, and you can't see what I'm doing, so I'll try to do it with my left hand. Start it in, get it all lined up. Once you get it, damn, there's a lot of pressure. Grab hold of it with a screwdriver and pull it back. Okay, and you're going to want to hold it. And then you just drop your plate in place, and it goes into the grooves. And then you can let it go. And then from here, the indicator comes out like it's supposed to and works, and your slide's back together, guys. So it's not hard to do, it's a bit tedious, but we haven't even got to tedious yet. That's still yet to come. But there's your slide, disassembly, and reassembly for the XD40 subcompact. Okay, so next thing we got to start on is the frame. So hang on, we'll be right back. Okay guys, had to get set up to do the frame. The only thing on this frame here, guys, that we're not going to take off is the magazine release. It's pretty simple other than that. And the reason I'm not going to take it off, guys, quite simply, is I've had it off several times, and every time it's taken me an hour to an hour and a half to get it back in there. It's just very tedious. It wants to go every which way. I don't know of any shortcut tricks to put it in there. I've watched several videos on it. I've talked to gunsmiths about it. I don't seem to have an act for putting that thing back in there quick. So I'm going to skip that part. And besides, it's very hard to see down in there. But I will link to a video in the description and the part where this gentleman does show how he puts it back in there. I've tried it that way and I can't get it to go. But we're not going to take that out. The rest of it we are. Now the disassembly of the frame itself, guys, is pretty simple. It starts off a lot like a SIG. You're going to pull up the takedown lever first. On the other side, give a little bit of pressure because it goes all the way through, and then I put it back down, or like I'm going to close it back or lock it back down. At that time, it will come loose from one side, start its way out, then start going in a clockwise motion, just turning it, pulling back on it, and it'll come loose of the frame. Okay, the next thing that we're going to take out are the locking block pins. Use my roll of tape here. And it's good to go from the right side of the pistol toward the left on this. Seems to come out a little bit easier that way. Doesn't matter which one you do first. You can knock them all the way through if you want. The back one acts as a trigger pin as well. They are symmetrical. The pins are symmetrical. They do have a lip on them here on each end. A little notch that kind of holds them in place. But they are symmetrical and they're identical, so it doesn't matter which one goes where. The next thing, just grab hold of the locking block and take it out. Now, this locking block right here, I do not know if the design of this slide stop lever spring is specific to just the subcompacts or not, but I've seen a lot of them where they'll have a spring where there's like a hole and it loops around and comes up and comes out. It's a big old long thing. This design is a lot more efficient in my opinion. It's smaller, it does exactly what it needs to do, plus it stays into the frame. You can remove it if you want, it'll pop right out, but pressure will hold it into the frame. So it's a lot, I think it's a lot better design. There's the locking block. Then we'll take out the slide stop lever, and then the trigger assembly, we're just going to push back on it like we're pulling the trigger and up and lift it up out of the frame. Then the trigger bar and the trigger bar spring will come loose. Okay, and that has the front end of the frame itself apart. It's all out. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is we want to start back here on the back end of it with the sear. Now, there's a couple of pins. There is a sear pin, and then there's this other pin, and I don't know the name of it, but it does not go all the way through the frame. It starts here and comes through until it bumps up against the, what is this? The striker safety lever. And you can take a small flathead screwdriver, wedge it between, and start pushing it out. What its function is twofold. One, it will hold the sear spring right here. It'll hold this lever of the sear spring down. And that's the other thing that it will do is it will keep the ejector stiffened up. The ejector is held in with two different pins, this one and the sear spring. You can push it all the way until it's flush. Take a small pair of pliers. You don't have to grip it really tight and just pull it directly out. You're not going to hurt the pin. And then this is what I mean, see, it'll hold the ejector straight, or it keeps it level. Okay, the next thing that you take out is the sear pin. You do not have to tap this. Push it directly out from one side, doesn't matter which. And you can pull it out and everything falls directly out the bottom of the pistol. But here you have your sear spring, you have your ejector, you have your sear, and your striker safety lever. Okay, that's that assembly there. The last thing to take out is the grip safety. Come back to our roll of tape here, take a small punch and knock it straight out. Now, before you pull it all the way out, you're going to want to look at how this is together. This pin has a little notch right here that the grip safety spring loops up through the hole, and it actually holds in right here. When you put it back together, you can hear it click. I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up on camera or not, but we'll try. But as you're looking at it, it's to the left-hand side of the gun, so that's the way you want to put it back in. It's out, then pull your punch out, and then you can just lift the grip safety right out, and here's the grip safety spring. And that's it, with the exception of the magazine release, which we're not going to take out. There's your disassembly of the frame. Okay, pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, adjust the camera here just a little bit, and we'll go ahead and we'll do a reassembly. Now, reassembly, guys, is exact reverse of the way we took it out. The hardest part of this right here really is the grip safety and the grip safety spring. Now, the grip safety spring, if you'll look at it, it has a short, hopefully this will show up on camera, it has a short end and a long end with a loop. If you hold the grip safety with the curving toward you, the loop goes on the very, very bottom, and you can push the grip safety spring into it, and you can get it to where it will actually hold by pressure. Okay, and that way you can see all the way through it. Then from here, I start from the back of the pistol itself and just line up the holes, literally, so until I can see all the way through them. Then from here, take a 3/32 punch from the back side, and push it in until it starts to hold. Okay. Now, here's where the fun part starts. Our pin remember I said before, our pin has a notch in it that goes to the left-hand side. We start on the left-hand side, push it through, and we start to tap it until it clears the spring, okay? Then I usually hold my hand here and tap it, not with it up against any part. Just hold the frame, let the frame rest on the table, tap it with a mallet, and hopefully it will clear that spring, and then you can tap it on home. And then there it is. All you have to do then is center it. Now, hopefully you'll be able to hear it whenever it comes. I'm just going to press down on it, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it when it clicks into place. That's it. And if the grip safety sticks, then that means it's off to one side. And that's it, because it will move in there slightly. And that's all there is to it. The grip safety's back in. That sometimes can be a bit tedious, so you just kind of have to work with it. The next part that goes in is the sear and the safety lever. And you'll hold the sear where it's kind of like a backward 7 toward you. And then the sear safety lever, or the safety, what the hell is this fucking thing? The striker safety lever. Why the fuck can't I remember that? The sear and the striker safety lever, there's a notch on the striker safety lever and there's a notch on the sear. They're both going to be facing up, so it more or less goes together like this. Now when you get ready to put it in, you have to put these two in at the same time. Because of the way that the frame is designed, you actually kind of have to go down into it and push toward the back. Now I go ahead and push the grip safety in to get it out of the way. And I just dropped it, so I have to do it again because fumble fingers here fucked up. And fumble fingers fucked up again. One more time. There we go, got it that time. Now, small punches work wonders here, guys. Go ahead and put the small punch in, and it holds the sear assembly in. We're going to hold it in there for just a moment. Now the safety, the striker safety lever will not come out unless the sear does. Okay, so what I do is more or less just hold it in place with my hand, remove the punch because you don't want it to come out, and I start the sear pin through. Doesn't matter which side you go through first. Just work with it until you get it to go in. All right, and there it is. Now I stopped it right there because we want to make sure that we put our sear spring in, and we're going to put our ejector back in. The ejector slides in the back part. And then I usually turn it toward, kind of put it on a bit of an angle, and drop in the sear spring so that you can push it through the hole. All right. And you can come around this side and you can look, and well, you can move the ejector up and work with it until the sear pin goes all the way through. At that point, you're just going to make sure that it's slightly recessed on each side. And that part's back together. The only thing that we have left to do now is our other small pin. And we start it on this side of the frame and just kind of start pushing it through. Now, go ahead and start it through. And it actually, remember I told you before, it holds the ejector stiff. Start it through till you get a portion of it through. Flathead screwdriver. Take the arm of the sear spring that is up, and you're just basically going to fish it underneath that pin. And then from there, push the pin all the way through until it touches metal on the other side. And we have the back end of our pistol frame back together. Okay. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put our trigger assembly back together. Now this trigger itself, there's a slot right here for the trigger spring, the straight arm of the trigger spring to lay down into. And then the trigger bar itself goes in from the left side as you're looking at it, through the spring, which I just love it when they make assholes out of you. And so it fits together like this. When you put the trigger bar assembly in, push it all the way to the left, or all the way to the side of the frame, and just guide the trigger down in, and it'll sit down in there just perfect. Slide stop lever goes in next. It's got a notch right here for it to lay into. Just set it right there. Our locking block, I found if you start from the back first, make sure everything's off to the side, start from the back, and it'll just slide right down in. And then from here, we'll put our locking pins in. And then the second one, if you look through, you see through the hole, push back on the trigger just a little bit, give a little bit of a twist, and push it up, and it'll guide on through. Then you can tap them home. And again, make sure that they are recessed slightly. Sure they're even on both sides. All right. Then our frame is literally back together almost, with the exception of the takedown lever. Now we have a spot right here. You can start with it at 3 o'clock or at 12 o'clock. Either one, doesn't matter. Again, clockwise rotation until it's all the way in. And there we are. Our frame is back together. Put our slide on. Lock it back. There we go. All right. Next thing that we want to do is we want to test our firing pin. Should jump. There it goes. All back together, ready to rock and roll and shoot another day. Now, before I can carry this gun again, guys, I will make sure that it is functional. So I will not carry this until we take it to the range and put about a box of ammo through it. So I'll have to carry, probably carry the 2.7 tomorrow. But that's okay. It's not that hard. It takes a little bit of time. It's a little tedious. If you take your time with it, it's not hard to do. It's just like a Glock or a SIG or anything else. This is probably a little bit more complex than a Glock. In some ways, the slide is much more complex. If y'all ever seen people, like Pete's got a great slide disassembly on both this and on the Glock. Glock comes apart like that. So big kudos to the simplicity of the design on the Glocks, especially their slides. I think the frame is, I'd say the frame on the Glock and this is pretty close. The taking off the magazine release on the Glock is a lot easier than this. Putting it back together is a lot easier than this. Well, maybe not taking it apart, but putting it back together definitely is. But anyway, if you take your time, you should not have any problems. So hopefully, if you decide to tackle this, if you want to do a full cleaning or something breaks and you want to replace it, you can use this as a guide. Now, I will try to put some timeline places in the description so you can skip to different places. Because I know this is a long video, but hopefully it'll help you out. So, hey guys, let me know what you think. Did I fuck it up too bad, or is it easy to follow? What do you guys think? And that's all I got for right now, guys. So, hey, y'all be good. Later.